A bit of an introduction first on what this course is about. So this is actually a course that we are currently offering in Isha Open Run Academy. This belongs actually the one that I'll be delivering for this morning is more of like just an introduction of a complete course that we are also offering course 416 Artificial Intelligence and Machine Learning. Now, because of the current gaining popularity of what this technology is about, it's also important for us to understand how can we now apply AI and ML, specifically the latter, machine learning, into within the context of Open RAN and telecommunications. No? So you might be wondering also with the given rise of products and services already available right now for AI and ML, will this also have a play in how we also design and operationalize our telecommunications industry as a whole? No? Not just in Open RAN or in the radio access part, which by now you may have already gained some understanding, focusing more on the wireless access domain of our telecommunications network, but in the complete bigger picture of it, right? So what I'll be delivering is, in fact, a bit of a recognition here and acknowledgement. A course that was also created by one of our creators, Sir Melchizedek Alipio, but with a bit of also of my own inclusions here. No, now let's continue. No, now like all other technologies, we also understand that artificial intelligence has the potential to already give out the developments and improvements of what it can provide to society as a whole, right? We see this as yet another technology. It has its own promises that will eventually lead us to a somewhat positive and albeit idealistic and utopic future, right? Whenever we already start talking about AI, ML, robotics, mechatronics, no? The first thing that already comes into mind are pictures that we would normally see in media nowadays, right? And if we're going to be optimistic about it, we see a future that, my apologies here, I'm a bit of a young millennial here, somewhat of a 90s babies also. If you are familiar with the cartoons, the Jetsons, then that is where the picture of AI would be coming in, wherein robots and artificial intelligence systems in general are living peacefully and coexisting with humanity as a whole. Right? So that is somewhat the promise or the ideal of what AI can offer to us. However, of course, on the flip side, it's not always the case that we have these similar perceptions, right? Because with the positive perception of having an idealistic view of what AI can offer to us, completely being a beneficial technology in general, there is still also the somewhat unsettling feeling that are we even going into the right direction of using these technologies um, in such a way that would really benefit us, right? I mean, how far are we really taking out this technology, right? And in fact, with the given further developments of what AI and ML is currently also going through, there will eventually come a time that we would, as a society or as humanity as a whole, would eventually stop and say, hey, um, won't this, I mean, to put it bluntly, no, won't this bring us instead of benefit or development or bring us to the next era of humanity as a whole? Will this also bring us to a complete downfall? There is also that underlying question of it. No? If you are familiar with the Dune series, no, the novels, and also with the current movies nowadays, no, there is a section or there is an era within that overall plot. No, we'll call the Butlerian Jihad, wherein it is really more of like a competition or really like a war between humanity and uh, intelligent systems. And they didn't even in the books, they didn't even say it was robots, or AI systems, intelligent systems. That is what the novels have told us. No, having said that, no, the Butlerian Jihad. This is a war that was fought between humanity and intelligent systems, and obviously humanity won after that war, but with also the um, general promise that humanity will never build intelligent systems after the war. And this is where already the depictions of the different societies in June would already come in. The Kwisatz Haderach, uh, the Mentats, among others, right? Wherein they have developed human intelligence to the extent that they would no longer be needing intelligent machines. Now, where am I coming from here? No, are we also going into that same direction, no, as a society in quote unquote real life? No? Now, apart from that, also we cannot also completely ignore that, because of the current state that we have right now in the technology as a whole, uh, of course, we do not always see AI to be robotics on its own, right? Because let's face it, when we see machine learning, we see intelligent systems at the front, especially if you are non-technical. And I'm talking here of about somebody who is working with engineering and sciences in general. We just see machine learning and AI to be somewhat just a mixture of equations and formulas, because frankly, that's what they really are, right? But for those who are, of course, non-technical, there is still the comical perception of what AI can really offer to us on having, say, if you are really looking into social media nowadays, no, whenever we connote AI and ML, we see these disfigured faces and videos of where does this piece come in and where does this other piece come in, and we see multiple limbed humans doing all sorts of things. So this brings us a somewhat a complex picture on what AI and ML is really bringing into society as a whole. Okay, but let us step back a bit also, because us as technical people, as engineers, no, as scientists, and those who are really working on with um, sciences in general, no, let's have a bit of a step back and really discuss what really is AI when we are talking about this science in general. And this is where the lecture would be coming in. No? I'll focus more on what AI is, its definitions, also a brief history on what AI has already gone through throughout the years. Because despite what we are currently seeing right now in social media, especially with the sudden rise of OpenAI being gaining popularity at around 2020, so it still actually goes way back. Right? So we'll have a brief history lesson here, and also describe the different branches and subsets of AI. I'll also here discuss in today's lecture, um, one aspect of AI, because we see AI to be something that is similar to other sciences, has several branches and subfields. No? And I'll focus more on the computational aspect of it, which is machine learning. Okay. And finally, like all other technologies, discuss what are the different techniques and use cases where machine learning can be used, and especially like all other technologies, no, discuss the challenges and limitations, what it can also offer to us as a society. Because let's face it, no, like other similar technologies, this is no magic bullet. No, AI and ML is no magic bullet. It's not something that we see or we put on that pedestal and see that this is already the answer to all of our problems. It's still right now, no, despite all of the advances, still faces some challenges and limitations. And that is also what we'll be discussing for this morning. Okay, so based on the books, based also on research, how do we define AI in general? Okay, so AI, this is a broad field of computer science which concerns about the creation of intelligent systems capable of performing tasks typically requiring human intelligence. The reason why it's called artificial intelligence, this is in relation to human intelligence. We are creating intelligent systems and machines that is able to somewhat mimic how human intelligence also functions. Okay. However, despite this general definition, there is really no specific definition of AI, right? It's not like other technologies that, for example, if we say 4G, if we say 5G, if we say mobile broadband, no? Or if we say network functions virtualization, or if we say Python programming, it has specific definitions. This is somewhat also similar to other sciences, wherein it can share multiple definitions depending on who you are talking to. Right? So here are some of the sources that I was able to find out. So according to Copeland, AI is the ability of a digital computer or a computer-controlled robot to perform tasks commonly associated with intelligent beings. Notice also here in my first definition that I did not associate here AI to robotics, but in some sources or in some researchers or scientists, they already also connote AI with robotics. Right? Another definition here by Lekowski would be AI is the simulation of human intelligence processes by machines. This means that even though to us as humanity, as human beings, we see a intelligent system behaving like a human, it is somewhat still coming from the perception of who is looking into the AI system, because we are just perceiving an AI system to behave like a human being, or it behaves like as if it has human intelligence. Okay. Now, there are also different aspects on how AI in general, no? Depending also on the different use cases on how AI is being applied. Okay, so what are some practical aspects of AI in general? So I note down here three. So the first one is problem solving and decision making. AI systems can analyze information, identify patterns, and make decisions based on their understanding of the world. Okay, so this is also, albeit you can say that one of the main reasons why we even developed AI in the first place. It's because of their problem solving and decision making capabilities. Okay, going back again to the analogy that I gave a while ago on June, no, or on Dune, the reason why intelligent systems was even developed by humanity in that novel is because of, similar to what we are going through right now, they want complex systems to be able to perform calculations more efficiently, right? Another aspect of AI is the ability to learn and adapt. Arguably, this is also one aspect that we can somewhat see some resemblance to humanity as a whole. Because let's face it, right now, no, we cannot learn that fire is hot unless we touch the flame and burn our own selves. Right? We would not know the feeling of what water would be unless we have felt already water passing through our hands or fingers or throughout our entire body. So there is already a stimulus, no? But within that onset of stimulus also, there is the concept of experience, right? So if you're going to put it more in a more real life perspective here, no, you will not know that a problem can be solved unless you have also experienced that problem yourself, went through the challenges of it, and eventually find a solution for it. And that is where also the aspect of adaptability of an AI system would be coming in. Right? AI systems can learn from data to experience, albeit its form or its way on how it learns and adapts is very different as to how humanity would also learn and adapt. Right? Normally, we would be involving something that would be tactile, right? But let's say if you're working in a corporate world, it is also a similar scenario wherein, say, you encounter a problem in your system right now. Say, for example, you are a developer or a programmer, and you encounter the bug or an error, right? And through previous experience that you might have already garnered when you are still studying for your undergrad or when you're studying in college or university or wherever, you're able to fix that problem because it's through experience. And similar also, AI systems have that capability as well. Okay, another one is to imitate perceived human intelligence, right? We can say that human intelligence is something that would just involve the mind, right? Meaning cognitive human intelligence. But it's not really just that, right? It can also pertain to its ability to imitate human emotion or perceived human emotion, right? If you are looking into YouTube or if you have seen some video clips, right, you may have already seen some real life kiosk robots. I would say kiosk robots here because normally they are just androids with half a bust, or they're just created only with up to the bust level. And what they just only do is to be like a concierge to people who are coming and going in, say, front desk, for instance. No? So, with that scenario in mind, no, the robots are also capable of expressing human facial emotions. Right? They can see anger, or they can be happy, they can be surprised. Right? So, while not achieving true human intelligence yet, AI systems like the ones that I have given a while ago, no, can also have such capabilities or perceived capabilities. No? Such as to recognize objects and finally react on those objects, understand human language based on what they have heard, and of course, generate it in the form of, say, speech or action. Okay? And also in relation to what I have mentioned a while ago, um, environment interaction, wherein because you introduce the stimulus, of course, the AI system is also capable of interacting with the environment in the form of, say, doing speeches, talking to you, say, walking if there's a certain obstacle that it's given on its path, or in a more logical aspect, and albeit more applicable to us, no? If you introduce a new set of data, have it behave in a certain way. Okay? So, I mentioned a while ago that AI doesn't just involve or is not a 2020 thing, right? I mean, even though, let's face it, during the onset of the pandemic, we have learned or we have recently gained popularity on one of the AI chatbots nowadays, no? Chat GPT, no? It was developed by OpenAI. Um, the science itself has already been there, would you believe, as early as 1950s. Okay, despite the boom, so what I'm showing to you here is actually a graph that was taken in ourworldindata.org. No? So this is a website that also offers statistics. No? Here's a high-level graph or a high-level plot graph on the available popular use cases of AI throughout the years. And what can we notice here? No? Even though much of the available and popular use cases nowadays in the form of GPTs, generative pre-trained transformers, has gained popularity at the start of 2020, it actually goes way back to 1950s. Heck, there are even, you can arguably also mention that there are some resources that also point to intelligent systems going way back to the before the Common Era period. No? If you are familiar with, you've heard probably of what golems are, right? I mean, it's something that is normally also associated to fantasy or to science or to fiction books, right? But try to look up golem within the context of Judaism, right? Or in the context of the early periods, no? And by that, before the Common Era, 00 BCE and below, right? There are already some traces or evidences of human societies developing intelligent systems, not in the form of machines, wires, springs, and algorithms, but using clay, using mechanical systems such as gears, normally powered by water, sunlight, or steam. So the concept here is still the same, but albeit, and we can also say that this is somewhat of a primitive approach, but hey, it is there, right? Now, AI as a science, similar also to other technologies, no? It is a broad field in general. No? It is a science that covers more than one field of computer science. And even though it has its roots in computer science because it traces its concepts and principles in algorithms and methodologies and computations, no? It can even span across engineering, sciences, and sometimes it can even overlap with the non-science fields such as philosophy and the arts. Right? There is actually a study right now. Well, it has already been there for quite some time. The philosophy of AI, what it means to be human, right? So we can say that it has already been there. No, it has just been gaining popularity because of what depictions of media and available products and services we are normally seeing right now in the internet. Okay, so AI as a science covers more than one field of computer science, although it focuses more on its application. Okay, it doesn't mean that it's just completely isolated. It's not just one box, right? It can even go as far as philosophical disciplines. Okay, mainly because of its overlapping use cases and underlying concepts, right? Just the concept of being sentient, what it means to be sentient, is already a philosophical question in itself. How can you say that you are human versus to something that is a machine? Can you say that an android, because it is depicting emotions, it's already considered as human, right? So these are questions that somewhat are also being asked, not just in within the context of academia or within the context of school, no, but it's also being depicted in movies, in comics, right? Like for instance, if you are an anime lover, you have their Astro Boy. You also have the overlap of robotics and real life people, such as Alita. Okay, if you know Alita, Battle Angel, that's an anime also, a manga that has already been a movie. Ghost in the Shell, wherein we are really overlapping, or it depicts the overlap of robotics and humanity as a whole. Okay, AI, the movie, the namesake itself, okay, among others, right? So practically speaking, however, so going back again to our lecture today, no, whenever we are talking about AI in general, we normally think, or the first, although our first perception or first assumption of what AI is more on robotics, what we are actually pertaining to AI nowadays is normally dealing with machine learning or the training of a machine model to learn a certain behavior. Okay, because let's face it, no, chat GPT, chatbots are also there, right? It's actually a system. It doesn't have a corporeal or tactile interface. It has a software interface. But how we interact with the chatbot, it's technically also machine learning running at the back. Okay? Now, you may have already heard of these terminologies before, having said what machine learning is, no? But apart from that, also, you have other topics such as deep learning, right? So, how is AI associated to machine learning and deep learning? Okay, because these three are somewhat um, three also interrelated topics. No? So let's start off with the bigger umbrella here. No? We have AI. So we know that AI is a broad field of computer science dealing with the creation of intelligent machines. Right? If you're just going to zoom in on the aspect of AI that deals with the creation of machines, okay, or its objective is to create systems that would mimic human intelligence or human logic, That is where machine learning would be coming in. So this is a subfield of AI focused on developing algorithms or models that can learn from data and improve their performance on a specific task or tasks without explicit programming. So notice here I've highlighted the word also explicit programming because I think majority of you here or some of you here have already experienced creating your first hello world either in C or in Python or in Java. No? That is what you would call programming in general, right? You write certain code, you write certain scripts or procedures, you place it in a text file or in a source code or script, and pass it through an interpreter or a compiler and let it do its job. No? Either create an application or perform certain tasks. Okay. So in other words, you are setting out instructions on how to perform that given program. Machine learning behaves in a way that, yes, you are still programming something, but instead of explicitly telling the program or the application to do this, and that, you're giving it preset conditions on how it can behave. No? And once these preset conditions have been given out, it would have a specific response, right? So this is where the concept of without explicit programming would be coming in. And normally also when you develop something in the context of machine learning, no, it also involves the creation of models or using models and further optimizing them based on how you want to use these models. Okay, so if machine learning focuses more on creating a system or creating a model without explicit programming, is there an approach for us that can further make the creation of the model handle more complex data? Okay. Say in, for example, analyzing an image or say handling large volumes of numbers to perform a mathematical computation. There is an approach for it, no? And a different paradigm for it. And one of them is called deep learning. Oops, there you go. Deep learning. Okay, so deep learning is a subfield of machine learning, okay, wherein the structure of the model that you are creating resembles that of a human brain, or specifically the connections of the human brain called neurons. Okay, it utilizes the creation of artificial neural networks with multiple layers, okay, to process complex data and increase intricate patterns. So later on, I'll also be briefly discussing what deep learning is in application to machine learning and how these layers, because the keyword here for deep learning are layers, right? Whenever you are creating a deep learning model, no, or for instance, a convolutional neural network, a CNN, no, it involves the creation also and the optimization of layers. Later on, I'll be discussing this as well. Okay, so when we are now talking about machine learning as a statistical or as a computational approach, okay, there are two high level or two basic techniques on how you can go about it. This is basically how do you want to create your model, okay, or how do you want to train your model, because there are also two techniques. Okay, remember my definition a while ago that it involves the creation of a model without explicit programming. So meaning that you feed it with data, and based on the patterns that can be identified within the set data and the set thresholds that you have given it, no, it will behave a certain way. How you feed that data and how you train the model, you have two techniques. Okay, this is supervised and unsupervised. Okay, now supervised learning, it also has two most popular approaches to it. You have regression and classification, depending also on what you want to get out of your machine learning model. And also the same with unsupervised, you have two popular approach for this, clustering and associated rule. And we'll briefly discuss both of them here. Actually, I'm going to discuss what is supervised and unsupervised learning, as well as the two classifications for each technique. Okay, so what is supervised learning first? As the term implies, no? This is a learning or a machine learning technique that involves building a model and allowing it to make predictions based on evidence in the presence of uncertainty. Okay, a supervised learning algorithm, you give it, it behaves in such a way that you give it data that is already labeled. You train that model based on those labeled data so that when the model receives unlabeled data, it can already also identify what would be the output. So, in other words, if you're going to put this in an analogy to humanity or to us in society as a whole, this is where your classroom based learning would be coming in. The teacher would be coming in, they would be giving out lectures to you. They would be teaching you what is right and what is wrong, so that when you finish school or after you have finished school, I hope no that you would learn how to distinguish what is right and what is wrong. Okay, so this is where also the concept of spoon feeding would be coming in. I'm not talking here of spoon feeding as a negative term, but something that is somewhat an approach to teaching, wherein you give something, you tell the student that this is what it is, so that when they also encounter this similar object or similar experience, they would know how to label it and how to associate it. So it's a similar approach, no, put in a technical definition. Okay, so you still have a model here or an algorithm. You feed that model with training data sets, and this training data sets would also consist of labeled data. So in my illustration here a while ago, no, you have here your labeled data. You also have the labels. So the labeled data here would consist of here, no, four-legged creatures. And your labels here would be if the four-legged creature has spots, produces milk, and is normally domesticated and found in farms. You can say that it is a cow. If it is a four-legged creature and it has a long trunk, normally found in zoos, no? It is an elephant. And if it is a four-legged creature normally found in the deserts, and it also has a hump on its back, it is a pachyderm or a camel. Right? So you're giving it labels, and you feed these labels also alongside labeled data, so that you'll know, or the model rather would know, how it can deal with the data. So this is how supervised learning would be coming in. Okay, so I mentioned a while ago that there are two classifications of supervised machine learning. There is regression and classification. But how or when do I use which one, right? So when do I use regression? When do I use classification? Right? You might have also heard of these two terminologies in your probability and statistics class, or in your if you have taken engineering, no, you may have had your discrete math subject here, and you may have already encountered classification. Regression, this is somewhat you may have heard in your statistics class, right? Linear regression, to be specific. Are they the similar here in machine learning? Yes, in a way, they are. So, regression is a type of supervised learning technique or learning that is used to predict continuous values. Basically, you use regression or classification based on the kind of data that you have on hand. If your data consists of continuous values, such as income, okay, associated to year on year, right? Or the age of a certain age group based on a given year, or the salary of a given person for this specific company, or in a network perspective, no, the mobile throughput of a certain tower, no, for this certain time based on this certain utilization. Okay. Anything that would involve continuous data, normally, this is also associated to dates. Okay, so meaning you have a data set that would consist of dates alongside the value that you have to work with. You can use regression in order to predict what would be the next value based on the previous values that you have. Okay? You'll also notice that in regression, normally this is also called linear regression. You'll see that the graph being depicted here, you have your data points in the end, your regression line. It is depicted or illustrated using a linear form. And where do we experience this? Where have we might have already encountered this? In your algebra, right? Ever heard of the famous linear equation y is equals to mx plus b? So this is also where regression is being used. Okay. Normally, regression algorithms learn a function that maps from the input features to the output value. Okay. So meaning if you give it a certain input, it would produce a certain output based on past data that it has received. Okay? So, if regression deals with continuous data, how about categorical data? Okay? So, meaning you have sets of data and you want to identify um, if this data set belongs to something or to some other thing. Normally, this is also where statistics would be coming in. And say if you are dealing with correlation or you are doing a statistical test like ANOVA or a t-test, chi-square test, among other tests, no, that involves classification, association, or correlation, classification models would be coming. So this is the process of finding or discovering a model or function that helps in separating data into multiple categories. Okay, in classification, data is recognized or categorized under different labels. And normally, if in regression, you plot it in the form of a linear graph, in a classification graph, you're normally plotting it, say, in the form of a quadrant. Okay, and see if there are some common jumbles or common clusters found within a given dataset group. Okay, so if you are dealing more on data and the information that you want to get from your data is really more on, is there a certain common theme across all of these data sets? Then you can use classification as your model. Okay, so what can we learn from supervised learning? No? In supervised learning, we learned, no, that we can feed models with predefined data sets so that when it does get unknown data, it will know how to behave. Okay? Now, is there also another way for us or another approach? Because sometimes not all of the data that you have right now can be labeled or categorized. Essentially, you do not also know if what to deal with, what you deal with the data. Okay? But you still want to gain insight from it. Normally, when you also use machine learning as an approach in AI, you are trying to gain insight from data. Okay? You're trying to understand behaviors in the data, if there are certain trends or patterns for it. But sometimes, no, due to, say, availability of said data or the labels themselves, you do not also know how to deal with them in general. So this is where the different or the other approach on machine learning would be coming in, unsupervised learning. As the namesake provides here, unsupervised learning, this is the training approach of ML models using information without any prior training data available on hand. Okay? The task of the machine is to group unsorted information based on their similarities, differences, any patterns or trends, no, set with a certain threshold that you as a developer have set. Okay. So just because it is mentioned as, or just because it is unsupervised data, doesn't mean that willy-nilly you just leave the data as it is and you just let the model do its thing, right? You still have to set something. You still have to configure something. And normally, this would come in the form of, I would suggest, say, a threshold. Okay. Unlike supervised learning, okay, so in real life scenario, this is where your self-taught or self-paced learning would be coming in, right? So in a typical classroom setup, there is a teacher and there's also a student. Here, you just have yourself and you are given training data or the data that you have, and you are essentially tasked into piecing together any common patterns or behaviors based on whatever it is that you have. Okay. But that doesn't mean that you are left on your own. Sometimes you are also guided. Okay. So that is where the analogy also of unsupervised learning would be coming in. Okay. No quote unquote teacher is provided. That means no training will be given to the machine model. Okay. Therefore, the machine is just restricted to find hidden structures or hidden patterns, okay, in the unlabeled data by itself. Okay. So how does it work? Normally, you give the model raw data, okay, and again, you set a certain threshold on that given data, and from there, no, you allow the model to work around with the data based on again the threshold that you have given. Okay, similar to supervised learning, I mentioned that we have classification and regression, right? For unsupervised, you have clustering and association rule. Okay, now how does clustering works? You can say that unclustering is somewhat similar to classification. Okay, remember that what I mentioned a while ago that for classification, um, you bundle together groups of data and find out any patterns or trends based on how they are clustered together. Similar also here in clustering. Okay, you still set a certain threshold, and based on this given threshold, allow the model to work with your data, play with it, no, until a certain pattern would fall. Okay, normally this pattern would come as an illustration, okay, in the form of data sets being grouped together. Okay, clustering algorithms work by iteratively moving data points closer or farther away to their cluster centers and further away from data points from other clusters. So notice here the term cluster centers. In clustering, this is the quote unquote threshold that you set into your model. You still define what your cluster centers would be. Okay, so one approach example of clustering would be k-means clustering. That's actually an algorithm, no, wherein the k here stands for the number of clusters that you want to form in your graph, right? So if say I set my k-means threshold to be 3, the model will try its best to group together the data sets into 3 clusters. If I set it into 5, k is equals to 5, then the model will try its best to group together data sets into 5 clusters, and so on and so forth. So that's how clustering works. Okay? For association rule learning, this is a type of unsupervised learning that checks for dependencies with other data. So, um, another data set can be given, and based on this data set, the model would then map and find any patterns or associations based on the actual data set that you are working with. Okay, so it tries to find something interesting, or it tries to find any relations or associations among other sets of data. Okay, so just to give you a simple example here, no, suppose I have a data set that would consist of 5 customers, right? And each customer is given with a cart or a basket. And within this basket, no, another set of data can be found inside the groceries that they have picked up and placed inside their cart or basket. Okay, customer one, inside their basket, they have milk, bread, butter. Customer two, they have milk, cereal, bread, butter. Customer three, milk, bread, and butter. and customer N, sugar and ice. Okay. So if another customer data set would be coming in and they picked up bread and butter, what is the probability or the possibility of them also picking up milk? So this is where association rule would be coming in. And you might have also experienced this similar algorithm in real life scenarios. Like say, for instance, no, say you log into a shopping app, say Lazada or Shopee, for instance, and you try to browse for, say, a new set of wireless Bluetooth headset. Okay, wireless Bluetooth headset. You'll notice that if you try to still scroll down looking for the model that you want, no, the app would also suggest other items for you that you might want to purchase. Like say, for instance, if you say, since you are already trying to purchase wireless Bluetooth headsets, no, why not try to also purchase a power bank for your for charging your headset? Hey, do you want a new set of covers for your Bluetooth headset? No, so these are suggestions that is being fed to you by the app itself. So this is also an example of how association rule is being put at play. Okay, so there. Now, I've discussed a while ago that um, machine learning, another approach for it, no, or another paradigm on how you can implement it is deep learning. Okay, so what is it? So this is a part of machine learning that uses artificial neural networks, right? Or the creation of neural networks to learn from complex data or from large sets of data, again, without explicit programming. Okay? Now, unlike in other paradigms of machine learning, wherein you just have a model, and this model normally would just consist of a function, a single function, if I'm going to put it as a simple example, no? um, deep neural networks or deep learning requires you to already build on layers, and these layers would consist of formulas and also functions, normally also connected to each other, okay, in the form of a network. Okay, so this is more of like how you structure out the model. Okay, and in deep learning, you structure it out as if it is like neurons in your brain. Okay, so to give you a more a more illustrated example here, no. And by the way, just a caveat here also, and disclosure: I am not a I am not a medical professional. I am an engineer by practice and also by profession. So please bear with me if I am using here some medical terms, because I'll be using some terminologies associated to the brain and to the neural system, or to the neural to the nervous system. Okay, so having said that, behold the biological neuron. Okay, so what is a neuron? Okay, so this is the cell found inside your brain, and normally it would consist of several parts. Okay, you have here the soma. So this is what you would call as the main body of the brain cell. Okay, this is where the impulses are being received and passed around. Okay, the one who is responsible for connecting the neuron to other neurons are the axons. Okay, so its terminals is responsible also for communicating the electrical signals from one cell to the other. Okay, or if say the brain cell is connected to other parts of the organs, no, such as the spinal cord, for instance, no, it is connected via the axon. Okay. And finally, you have the dendrites, which are used to receive signals from other connected neurons, okay, within the brain or from other organs. Normally, the dendrite can be found within the brain itself. Again, my apologies here if I got these wrong. No? So the dendrites, these are fibers that are also used to connect other neurons to other neurons. Okay, so we have, in a way, a typical biological neuron consisting of three basic parts. A part that would receive signals, a part that would process the signals, and the part that would output the signals and have it passed to the next connecting cell or to another organ. The dendrite, the soma, and the axon. Okay? Now, these three parts, if we're going to implement it in an artificial neuron, it would look something like this. Notice their similarities in terms of structure. Okay? In an artificial neuron, you create what are called input layers. Okay? And these input layers are also um, configured with weights. Okay? And eventually, these are all connected, okay, quote unquote, connected, or mathematical terms, summed up to a function called an activation function. This is where most of the computations would be done before the final output or result is produced to another output node. Okay? So in an artificial neuron, you have an input, you have the main body, you also have the output. And in most applications or implementations of artificial neurons in general, it would also normally consist of, let's face it, a linear equation. Okay. Despite all of the complexities that we have already discussed right now in machine learning, would you believe that an artificial neuron in its most base form is still the linear equation y is equals to mx plus b? It is still that same equation, but pre-configured in a different way. Okay, to put that more into, if to let that sink in more a bit deeper, no? Your input layer, these are your input variables. The weights themselves is the function or um, the parameter, okay, that you want to place. So I'm trying to analogize this to your linear equation. Y is equals to mx plus b, right? X here is your independent variable. Y here is your dependent variable or the output, okay? But the output is based on multiplying your input variable, your input layer, to a slope or m, in this case, the input weight, okay? And all of these are all connected via a plus sign, okay? Or to a bias in machine learning terms, no? Before it can produce an output. Okay, so the B here, the y-intercept, that is actually the bias, no? But it is still summed up. This is where the summing junction would be coming in. So imagine all of these discussions or these complexities of what machine learning is, its statistical approaches and such, and you're going to tell me that this is just y is equals to mx plus b? Because yes, it is. That's just that is also one application of ML. To think we would see this as something that is um, highly scientific or highly complex, but it still boils down to those simple equations. Okay? So, how now are these artificial neural networks connected to form a network? I mentioned a while ago that for us to create a neural network and to implement deep learning, we need to have these networks connected in layers. And normally, this would also have a somewhat similar structure here shown in the slide. No? So you have your input layers, and this layer, and this input layer, it would also consist of one or X number of neural networks. No? And its main objective is just to pick up input signals based on the data that you feed it with. Okay, normally the data that you feed a neural network model, no, would consist or can be illustrated or um, fed using a matrix, right? A matrix of numbers, a matrix of pixels, say in an image, okay, or in um, a matrix. Okay, and the matrix that I'm talking here is the matrix of numbers in your discrete math. Okay, so apart from the input layer, you also have hidden layers. So this is where the portion of the model that you as the developer of the model itself will not really much focus on. Right? So this is also where you now allow a bit of leeway for the model to behave. Okay, and the reason why it's also called hidden layers is because you, as the creator or the developer of the model, you don't really need much to focus more on what's going on inside these layers. Okay, because this is where majority of the calculations and feature extractions or data extractions are being produced by the model itself. Finally, it then has an output layer which delivers obviously the final result. Okay. A bit of a caveat here on neural networks is because in the output layer, normally um, we see a layer or we see a flow of a model in a neural network. Normally, its flow is from right to left, no, or from input going to output, right? So here's actually an example. No? Say you have a data set that would consist of images, and these images have pictures of cars, and you want the model to identify the location of the plate number of a given car image or a given vehicle image in general. So we know that an image is actually a matrix of pixels, and these pixels can then be translated into numerical values. These numerical values are then fed into the input model. They are also fed or they are also configured with a bias, okay? And this bias is also configured by the developer themselves. So notice no that there's a bit of supervised and unsupervised techniques being implemented here. Because like what I've said a while ago, the creation and the design of neural networks, it doesn't mean that what I have discussed a while ago about supervised and unsupervised learning does no longer apply in neural networks or deep learning in general. No? In fact, you can implement regression, classification, clustering, and associated rule using neural networks. Okay? So you can think of deep learning as an approach on how you can configure or how do you set up your machine learning models. Okay, going back to my illustration here a while ago. So the pixels are then represented as a matrix of numbers, and these numbers are then fed into your input layers, which then propagate the data within the hidden layers. Notice the formula being used by the hidden layers. The weight multiplied by the variable or the feature added to a bias. Does this look familiar? Y is equals to mx plus b. There you go. Okay? So the weights are then multiplied with the input signals or your matrix numbers, and the bias is added to all of them. Okay? Eventually, as it goes through the hidden layers, no, they come as weighted sums being fed into the next cascading part of the layer. Okay, the weighted sum of inputs is calculated and is fed to the activation function, to the node themselves in each layer to decide which nodes to fire. If I'm going to put it in this example, no, think of each node to be, say, a portion of the pixel or of the image itself. Normally, you would give, in an image, no, you have a dimension or a size. Think of a single layer to be one portion or one cell of your complete image. So say you have a 28 by 28 image, think of the layers that one layer or one node, okay, would associate a single point in your image. Okay? And depending on the calculations that is being fed by one layer to the next, each of these given cells are being activated. So Another analogy here would be, you know how LED lights work, right? So, or say a seven segment display. So, excuse my, well, all of us here are electronics folks, right? So, you know how a seven segment display works, right? Wherein you have a seven segment display, and depending on the LEDs that you want to light up, you want to display also a certain number. Think of that same analogy also here in a neural network, wherein each activation function or node is triggered based on if that given pixel is needed or not. Okay? And this continues to cascade across all of the different layers until it reaches the very end. Now, does this mean that once an output is produced, that's it? No, we still have to perform some error checking. Okay, so this is another capability of what a neural network has compared to other models, right? Because apart from just feeding the data from input to hidden layers and output, some models would also have what's called back propagation, wherein after an output has been produced, in other words, here, it is fed temporarily back on some few layers, okay, for cross-checking, okay, and also to reduce errors before a final result is produced. Okay, how far you want to go inside into your model or how many hidden layers would be back propagated to would also depend on the type of model that you want to use. Okay, so this is just actually just a general flow on how neural networks would work, right? There are in fact a lot of different available models that fortunately for us, we don't need to develop from the ground up. Okay, you can look into different resources or websites that already have predefined models, and it's already just up to you if you on how you want to optimize these models based on your use case. I think OpenAI also has their own defined models already. It's just a matter of calling those models, from their website, or from their repository, and just using it in your use case or application or what have you. Okay, some common websites that you can find some models would be OpenAI, obviously. There's also Hugging Face. Okay, there's also TensorFlow. I believe Google, they have made their I think they have Llama. No. Llama. There's also Llama, but it was the model that was produced by Meta, or formerly Facebook. So these are available models that you can already download and use, however you want to see fit. Okay. My main point here, why am I even discussing these different classifications, techniques, and approaches in machine learning in general? It's because really there is no one size fits all in machine learning. Depending on the type of use case that you have and the type of data that you want to work with and the output that you want to produce, each model and technique and paradigm would have their own strengths and differences. Fortunately for, I was able to find this resource also, a quick flow chart in order to identify what kind of algorithm that you want to use based on the type of data that you want or that you have on hand, and what do you want, what outcome you want to produce, right? So you can take a screenshot of this one also if you want. Okay, so because we are dealing with data, we are dealing with algorithms, and in general, the process of data science in general, machine learning, before you can create or instantiate or use your models, make sure that the data that you feed it with is also the desired data that you want to use or that you want to work with. Okay. Having said that, the practice of data science and engineering still applies when you are working with machine learning in general. Okay. Just because you have a large set of data doesn't mean that you need all of them. Okay. Meaning that you still have to prepare it. You still have to extrapolate it, do a bit of data wrangling first before you can even feed it into the model that you intend it with. Okay, and finally have it as a use case, no, in order to be used for whatever application that you have, or if you are working with robotics, have it configured into your um, embedded system. Okay, so I mentioned a while ago that despite the clamor of what companies, organizations, no, and even the media are portraying AI and ML as this next best thing. No? We are going AI. No? So, and I believe there are also some companies and also some mobile phone manufacturers who are leveraging on AI to be um, their catch-all. If you know, you know, right? But when you already have have the device itself, no, you don't you see some different kinds of behaviors and expectations that you really don't want actually to be felt. Okay, so having said that, no, there are some limitations and challenges that machine learning and even AI is still currently facing, and these are just some that I'm going to cite. So first off is there is the problem or the issue of ethics. Okay, so because you are dealing with data and this data made available right now in the internet, no, has been more prolific, more readily available for us, that sometimes it can be used for malpractice, or sometimes it can unintentionally or intentionally produce results that are somewhat questionable. Okay, so it still also applies in machine learning. Remember, even before, when machine learning was confined in the academia and within the fields of statistics and probability, no, we are already also facing a challenge on ethics in general, and this is no exception. AI systems can sometimes raise concerns about data privacy and security, requiring careful consideration of data collection and storage, okay, and usage practices. Another challenge, deterministic problems, meaning that based only on a machine learning model can only go far based on how you configure it with, right? So if you have a model and you just configure it to sort out four-legged creatures, it can only do as far as sorting out four-legged creatures. If you feed it, say, with a fish or with a data set that consisting of aquatic creatures, or dare I say single-celled organisms, it cannot, of course, it would produce unpredictable or erratic results. Okay? So same as goes here. It still has its own limitations in terms of logical reasoning, in terms of common sense, okay, or dealing with entirely new situations. Okay. Another limitation is the correctness and completeness of data. Okay. This is also that is also why actually I stressed out the importance of going through data science practices first before you can even start working with machine learning models. And by that, I mean that before you feed it with data, make sure that the data that you have are complete, accurate, and biased in a way that you want it to behave. Okay, let's face it, all of us have biases here. No? Ideally, there should be unbiased data, but sometimes that cannot be achieved, right? And that's also not what you want. Also. And the same limitations here also apply. Okay, another one, and especially this one, with the rise of um, generated AI as a use case, it becomes also a tool for misuse and misapplication. Okay, I believe there are some news outlets nowadays that have already also mentioned out that there are videos, okay, involving politicians, not here in the Philippines at least, no, but in other countries wherein they are giving out said statements. It is them who are the facade, but at the back, it's actually generated AI. Okay. And lastly, interpretability. Now, the lack of clarity leads to ambiguity and eventually lack of interpretability. This means that you have to make sure that the data that you feed your model with is clear and concise enough so that the output it would produce would also be clear and concise. Okay? A machine learning model also behaves like what a machine would also be doing in a physical sense. Okay? You've ever heard of the term garbage in, garbage out? Machine learning models are no exception. Okay? So there, we tackled a lot. Actually, the topics that I have discussed today are just the general tip of the iceberg of what machine learning is. And I hope that this session that I have given you at least gave you a bit of clarity on what to expect when you do start to pursue machine learning as an industry practice. So what have we learned for today? So we learned that AI, it doesn't just involve robots. It in fact is a broad field of computer science dealing with the creation of machines and intelligent systems that can mimic perceived human intelligence. In terms of its history, AI can go back as far as the 1950s. And sometimes it can even go back as early as the classical period or even before the common era, depending on the type of research or sources that you have. It covers AI, a wide range of sciences and fields, not just those that are dealing with the technical fields such as robotics and the sciences and engineering, but also other non-technical fields such as the philosophy and the arts. Okay? Machine learning as a subset of AI deals with the creation of models or algorithms that are used to somewhat, there is still the aspect of mimicking human intelligence, cognition to be exact, and logic, but only certain parts and aspects of it. Okay? An approach to machine learning wherein you create artificial neural networks is what you would call deep learning. And much like all other technologies, no, AI and ML still continues to face some limitations and challenges such as security, ethics, interpretability, and data ambiguity. Okay?